the Honey Drip. I'm Honey Bachan. I'm a women's personal transformation and aligned business coach. I get off on empowering women to have more confidence, more self-responsibility, and to show up for all that they're wishing and hoping that they could. I hope that you are feeling stable and steady and available to your own energy this week. I am recording this, will be last week on the new moon. I think it's a lunar eclipse, but I know in Vedic astrology, the energy is particularly gnarly, and I'm definitely not someone who likes to catastrophize around astrology, but I personally really felt this one, and pretty much everyone I've spoken to have been feeling a bit off this week. So if you're looking back at last week and you were really off and you weren't able to kind of get a lot done and you were kind of just flailing, this is just a little bit of permission, and I hope you're feeling okay and you haven't been too hard on yourself. It is a beautiful spring day here. I've been getting into the habit of spending half an hour weeding in my garden on my lunch break every day, because there are so many weeds in this beautiful, lush, wet springtime that I just can't keep up. So I'm doing a little bit every day. And because of that, there are a couple of flies in my studio. I think there's a mosquito, there's a lot going around. I hope that you can't hear them, and I hope that they're not distracting if you can. Apologies if you can. I think a lot of people really romanticize moving to the country, and they never actually talk about things like bugs and mud, and that you will wear gumboots for 3/4 of your life. And the amount of bugs, lizards, worms, ducks, birds, etc., field mice, possums, all that stuff that I interact with on a day-to-day basis is absolutely mind-blowing. I swear to God, I think we would have tens of millions of lizards in our garden. If you look in my garden at any point in time, you'll see at least 50, which is a really good thing, and that means that there's a beautiful ecosystem there. I just wish we had some frogs, and I've been trying to call them in for a while, but there's probably too many birds around too. So enough about that. I wanted to start today by inviting you to a super special offering that is going to be happening over the New Year Christmas period, starting in early December or mid-December and running until March. And this is my first group coaching mastermind style coaching and training, which is all focused around clarity. Called the Clarity Curator. And I've created this offering specifically because, in my experience, most of my clients, and especially my community at large, I think the main thing there's a couple of things that are holding people back. And one of the really main ones is lack of being clear. And that can be translated into understanding your direction. Just had a chat with some of the beautiful women in Founder Space this morning, and both of them felt like a lack of direction in their career was the kind of most significant area in their life where they felt a bit fuzzy or foggy. And both of them reflected on the fact that it doesn't make you feel good. It actually makes you feel pretty crap. And I think it can be this kind of hovering, unspoken, unpointed out stress that's kind of constantly under everything. And our conversation today is actually going to be all about stress and healing from stress. But one of the ways that you can begin to heal from stress is you can start to actively understand and curate what is important to you, why, and start prioritizing and moving in that clear and defined direction. I believe that a lack of clarity and direction actually really creates extreme low self-worth and low confidence. And something that I'm going to be talking about in another episode is that a lot of my following in community, and this is a bit uncomfy, this might be touchy, but I would love to hear from you if it touches something deep and important feeling. And that is that a lot of women that I interact with think that they're confident. They think, and maybe they externally express that they have high self-worth. I've said it to a beautiful friend that it's this pseudo confidence and self-worth. It's almost like part of the archetype of being a conscious spiritual woman is to act as if you are empowered. But when we actually look at the action that you're taking in your life, the direction that your daily actions are moving you towards, and the behavior that you can contribute to your day-to-day experience, it is not that of someone who is confident, embodying deep, obvious self-worth, and is empowered. It's actually the opposite. There's a lot of hiding, there's a lot of avoiding, there's a lot of procrastinating, there's a lot of comparing, and all of this, can be whittled down to a lack of self-confidence and self-worth. And one of the easiest ways to have low self-confidence and low self-worth is to feel unclear in where you're going and what you're doing. So that is why I have created this 3-month coaching container. We are going to look at values, actions, structures, behaviors, and we're going to make a plan. I initially did open up this container to be for business only, but I've decided it needs to also be for personal, because I think some of us need to actually get more clear on who we are before we can and what we want before we can step into a space of community leading. It is super affordable for what it is, a 3-month container. I think there's 3 sessions live per month where we'll be kind of bouncing off of each other and supporting each other, and you'll be getting motivation from me and tools and projects and actually actioning change in your life. And it is 2,222 Australian dollars, around about 1,400 American dollars for 3 months of a mastermind. That is pretty unheard of. So if you've been wanting to work with me, if you've been wanting to do business coaching with me, but it's a bit out of your ballpark, or it feels like too much to commit to, it feels a bit too intense, this could be a beautiful alternative. You could run your business through the curator, and it's very surprising when you do business coaching. People think that they're quite clear about their business, but when we go into actually articulating it and putting it on paper, they actually can't. So this could be a beautiful stepping stone to a business coaching intensive as well. I think it's such a potent time, Capricorn season, and I think Aquarius season, over that New Year's period. Get yourself really steady and confident at the start of the year so that you can move into the year with more clarity, confidence, and the ability to self-resource your self-worth. I will pop that in the show notes for you. So today's episode is from a question that I received in a DM. I think I've actually received about 3, and I've kind of mushed them into this one. And I received a couple of DMs about healing cortisol. And if you're listening, and that's the stress hormone, if you're listening to this, you might be like, well, I don't know anything about cortisol. I don't care about cortisol. I'm going to tune out. I'll ask you to please not, because if you think you have anxiety, stress, if you feel overwhelmed, if you procrastinate a lot, if you are wondering if maybe you've got ADHD, wondering if there's some other diagnosis there, and you're a woman, and especially if you're a woman who's beyond 30, mid-30s in your age, it would be doing yourself a disservice to pursue these other diagnoses and these other ideas without first trying to look at cortisol, because I have high cortisol, chronically high cortisol. I believe my mum actually had something called Cushing syndrome. And if you're interested in a picture of what life might look like if you let yourself continue to have high cortisol, I would Google Cushing syndrome, Cushings, and look at the images. Cortisol and the stress hormone is, of course, going to affect your mental state, your self-talk, your self-confidence, etc. But it actually has a gigantic effect on your physical body and your appearance as well, and your ability to be flexible and move and be active in your body too. But, if you have high cortisol, and you're in a situation where you feel like you have so much work on, or maybe so many ideas, and you're not sure where to action it, and instead you start to procrastinate, we could beat ourselves up and say, oh, I'm just procrastinating, I'm just crap at everything. Or we could go, I'm actually in a fawn state, from fight, flight, fawn, because my body and my hormones, my endocrine system believes that this is, a fatal decision or a fatal experience that I'm going through. And that happens when your stress hormone has been so high for so long that your threshold for what should feel and what should incite stress responses in your body is so low that everything that is, a nuisance or a slight annoyance or just something that you don't like dealing with is felt in the body as if it's a major, major big deal. And it always surprises me how little my clients understand about their hormones, especially as they're all women clients. And I don't say that in a way to well, I'm an expert and poo-poo you. It's just guys, this is the system that you're operating on. It is your control tower. You need to understand it in order to have an optimal life. And I strongly believe, if you follow my TikTok, you'll see I'm always talking about hormones, and you can't go after your dreams, try to build a super healthy lifestyle where you're being consistent with your workouts and you're embodying your values, or begin to build an abundant business if the foundation and your physical vessel through which that action is happening is totally jacked up and out of whack. And definitely not all, but a large chunk of my clients definitely have high cortisol. It can be it can be awful for interpersonal relationships as well, because when you have high cortisol, you're much more defensive and you're really very reactionary. Everything is, I've got to protect myself, or I've got to get out of here. And you begin to lose touch with reality to an extent. You see things as way more full on and intense and big deal and something you need to get upset about, and really, in the scheme of things, they're probably not. It's actually a physical response that is happening. So there are so many symptoms of high cortisol. I haven't actually pulled any up, and because I also have, cortisol is this hormone that, just to be super simplifying things, women have a few different types of a few different sex hormones, and the major ones that we talk about are progesterone and estrogen. And if you are using or you're creating a lot of cortisol, your bodily responses and your mental responses are telling your body that you need to be stressed out, your body will start sacrificing progesterone to make more cortisol. And that's what creates an imbalance of your sex hormones, which would look like estrogen dominance. So if you have estrogen dominance, you need to look at cortisol. And it's not like, there's a bit more science to it than that, but I've had quite a few like intense scientists comment on my TikToks and say, what you're saying is right, this is the precise system that happens, or these are the ways the cells change, etc. But I'm saying it in that really layman's terms, but that is essentially what happens. We start sacrificing the hormone that makes us feel young, go-getter, capable, confident, and powerful in order to have more of the hormone that promotes stress and hypervigilance and reactionary behavior in our bodies. And yeah, just so you know, I do this work with 99% of my clients as a foundation, because you can't expect to get so much output from your body if you're not looking after it at a really foundational level. And your creativity, your creative mind is part of your body. So some of the symptoms that I have experienced that I can think of off the top of my head is stubborn weight gain that doesn't move, doesn't shift, even though you're doing all the right things. Chronic inflammation. A lot of people say weight gain around the belly. That wasn't my experience, but that is common. Really strong sign of high cortisol is having that little hump neck. So just at the base of your neck at the back, having that little hump, or noticing that you're beginning to develop that's a sign of high cortisol. Hair thinning, hair loss, sleep issues, not being able to stay asleep, having a hard time going to sleep and waking up in the morning. I can't think of anything else, but there are so many symptoms to it. Maybe go and Google them. But on a kind of personal level, I would say if you notice yourself being a bit touchy, a bit reactionary, always kind of scoping all situations for what's going to go wrong, if you consider yourself to be anxious, this could also be part of what's going on. And I am going to share a ton of tips for cortisol balancing, and the vast majority of them are free. So why not try this first before, going down any other roads that have their own connotations and problems. So obviously, cortisol is the stress hormone. And one thing that creates a lot of cortisol in our body, which most of us do, is coffee or caffeine, specifically and especially caffeine on an empty stomach. You can kind of modulate the effects of caffeine if you have it on with a meal, after a meal, with protein, with fat, etc. And the quality of the coffee does matter. And decaf is always an option. Another option is matcha, which still has caffeine, still has quite a lot of caffeine, but because of the other chemicals in it, it gives you that caffeine at a kind of lower output over much longer time. So like 4 hours versus 2 hours for a peak and crash, and less of a peak and more of just a steady ongoing. I've drank some matcha this morning, so I'm feeling that. And matcha has like way more antioxidants than like foods like red wine or blueberries or anything. So it's kind of a double whammy. And I do think it's really, really helps your skin too. But an easy way to tell if you're dependent on coffee is just to go for a day without and see if you have any symptoms. If you have headaches, brain fog, lethargy, anything, nausea, anything like that, it's probably a good idea to chill out or regulate your coffee intake. If you're anxious, you need to probably chill out on the coffee, if not give it up. I used to think that I was a highly anxious person. I'm not sure if I was, but I was drinking 1 to 2 large coffees. So that's 4 shots of espresso daily when I was working in the design industry. And I was a mess emotionally. I was very reactive. Everything was a big deal. Everything would really stress me out. And I'm not sure whether that was anxiety or whether that was literally just caffeine. So in the morning as well, your body has higher levels of cortisol naturally. And when we then add on top and make it produce excess in the morning, you're going to crash way more. So the biggest symptom that I forgot, which is ridiculous because it's the main problem that I've had, is fatigue, especially fatigue in the early afternoon, like 2 to 4 p.m. And then you might feel a bit better in the evening. That is a surefire sign that you have cortisol imbalance. If you're like, oh, I might have cortisol imbalance, I want to check, I think you can check via blood test. You can definitely test with a dried urine test called a Dutch test, which I think you can order through your doctor or a naturopath. But as I said, most of these things that I'm going to talk about are either free or very cheap. So you could just try them and see how different you feel. I've currently got one client who's trying 2 things differently. And her whole demeanor, her whole outlook, her ability to do stuff and finish things and action things, I'm sure her creativity, honestly, just like she's way nicer to be in a session with because she's not jacked up and stressed and hyperactive and waiting for the next thing to defend or be reactive against. And she feels much better herself. And one of the side effects of that is like she's a better mom, she's a better partner. This isn't just about being a great one solo individual person or running your own business. It's about having a multifaceted, holistic life that is fully supported from the foundation up. So coffee. Also, making your workouts be in the first half of the day. That's because cortisol is naturally high. So if you're pushing your body to create excess cortisol in the afternoon with a hard workout, it can dysregulate and also affect your sleep cycle. With exercise, I have had someone say to me, like, that's awful. You shouldn't tell someone when they should exercise. People should just be able to exercise when they can fit it in. I get that, but we're arguing with circadian science. Like, this isn't my opinion or my idea. This is circadian rhythm. It's just what it is. It's just what mammal human bodies do. It's not that deep. So keeping your workouts to the morning. With all hormonal imbalance issues, workouts should be less than 45 minutes at a time. So that might mean that you do a couple of 45-minute workouts in the day if that's, what you want to do. I do keep my workouts to 45 minutes, but I also do a lot of walking, a few hours a day, and I don't really count that as a workout because I don't feel like it's too strenuous, but to each their own. So keeping your working out to lower than 45 minutes in a session and just getting the most out of those 45 minutes. I also, this is a bit controversial, but there is a big school of thought to say that sweating is one of the ways that we detox cortisol. We detox excess hormones through our sweat, our urine, and our poo. So making sure that you're regular and you're going to the toilet minimum once a day is a great way to make sure that your hormones are in balance. So sweating is really helpful. And if you've got excess cortisol in the morning, it would make sense to sweat then to get it out of your system. And that's what I do. And I find that really helpful. If you've got really, really high cortisol and things are really bad, you're probably not in a state to be able to work out to a point that you build up such a sweat. So in that case, doing an infrared sauna or just a normal sauna, whatever you can get to, maybe at your local pool or something, if you're running low on cash, is a good alternative. But it's kind of like you have to learn within your own body what's pushing the cortisol and when it's too far. And you can only kind of work that out yourself. Like I have had practitioners say to me, you're probably working out too hard in your cycling. But a couple of ways that you can tell is you can take your temperature 45 minutes before you work out. I think maybe it's 20 minutes before you work out, and then take it 40 minutes after you work out. And if your temperature has dropped, that's a sign to say that workout was probably too hard. Also, if I know I used to get this when I used to run to and from work, and when I would run to work, I'd run really fast, overdo it, and then I'd feel really freezing for the first 3 hours of work. If that's happening, that's probably a sign as well that it's a bit too much for you. Obviously, screens, apps, notifications, all of this stuff is not, everyone loves to talk about dopamine, but it's also pushing cortisol because you don't know what's on the end of that notification. You don't know what you're going to see, especially like TikTok and Reels, checking news and things like that. Like you can open your TikTok For You page and like you can see someone, like yesterday I saw, someone talking about their dog that's dying, then someone like doing a funny joke, and then like someone who was in palliative care saying, this is the last video that I'm going to do, and talking about literally them dying with their daughter sitting there. And then it's like a fashion one. And it's too much for we're not used to seeing that many faces or experiencing that spectrum of emotion in that little time. That has never happened in human history. So these things are going to jack up your cortisol. I've said it before on the podcast, social media is not relaxation. Of course, maybe once a fortnight you want to veg out, but do not deny and gaslight yourself into thinking that it is self-care, because it is fucking not. It is the opposite. And unless you have so dialed in what you follow and what's muted and unmuted, and maybe you're just watching it passively and you never engage and you never talk to anyone, you never comment, it is probably going to be a stress space for you. TikTok is a major stress space for me, and it took me a little while to really recognize and admit that when I log into TikTok and I check the comments, it is a full stress response in my body, because it's just such a wild west space, and it's such a funny time that we're going through. I saw someone say the other day that the TikTok generation or whatever are people who say that anything they don't like, they accuse as being misinformation. And that's kind of like the major source of stress for me on TikTok, is that people will take a tiny little bit of something that you said and say that it's unhelpful to X group, or you're being unkind to one community, or you don't know what you're talking about, thinking that you're talking about something other than what you are. And it's very interesting because it's pretty impossible to say something and never ever could it possibly be linked to affecting a community. Like we can't, again, it's the same as the last, two episodes ago, we can't be for everyone, and like it's not humanly possible. So we need to kind of allow that. And also, the thing that I always think about with it is, why are we not realizing that like people have self-sovereignty and discernment? And if they take a TikTok as gospel and they go out and they do action on it, or they change their lives because of it, like that's more of a problem than the possibility of potentially offending a small sect of people somewhere. And I like to think that the people that I work with and my followers have discernment and know that they're going to get their psychological advice from a psychiatrist, and they're going to get their health advice from a doctor, etc. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm talking about cortisol, but I am talking about the experience that I've been through with lots of doctors, with lots of naturopaths, and these are all just natural self-healing tools that aren't going to do you harm if you do or don't do them. So moving on from my TikTok thing, I know I can tell when I open TikTok, there's changes in my body. I need to be on TikTok for my business, potentially questioning it every day. But that means that when I do engage with TikTok, I am ensured that I've got food in my belly, I'm warm, I'm comfortable, I'm not rushed, and I take really deep diaphragmatic breaths when I'm opening it. So that's one of my triggers. And another trigger of mine is my partner rushing me in the morning. That I don't know where that comes from, but that creates a lot of cortisol in my body. But you will have little triggers yourself. So working out what triggers are happening for you is probably very important. Not only being exposed to so many notifications and screens and different colors and visuals and sounds and everything, but also literally the blue light from screens affects our circadian rhythm, which affects our body's production of hormones. And for instance, if you're looking at a blue light screen until really bright, until 11, 12 o'clock at night, your hormones are going to be completely out of whack. You might be like, I'm a shift worker, what can I do? The reality is, shift worker, it's bad for hormones. Like, that's what you're working with. So you want to do all of the other lifestyle things that you possibly can. One thing that you could do is wearing blue light blocking glasses. That's just like I always suggest, and this isn't sponsored, it should be, Bon Charge used to be called Blue Blocks. That's the ones that I use and I'm wearing right now. And I also use their red light reading clip at night. So really lowering the color, the contrast, the brightness of your screens, and wearing blue light blocking glasses, maybe wearing red light glasses after, I think it's an hour before you want to go to sleep, so that your body understands that it's not staring at a really bright sun and it can start to calm down and relax. One thing that is interesting for cortisol is that if you have high cortisol, you do need to make sure that you're eating some carbohydrates. I mean, most of us are eating some carbohydrates, but if you're on a really low carb diet, that's going to keep pushing cortisol. And that's really hard if you have high estrogen like me, because high estrogen requires low carb. But if you have both, you have to kind of negotiate it, because carbs kind of help your body to calm down. And a really easy way of doing that is just have a little bit of carbs before you go to sleep. It can really benefit the whole system. And the same thing with blue light goes for overhead light. I would say for a good 10 years, my house has been a candlelight at sundown house. A lot of people have thought that I was very weird for that, and that's why I'm also into hand making my own candles now, because I go through so many. I have a big candle that I carry around with me when I'm moving around the house, so that I don't have to turn lights on, and that is going to be so, so supportive of your hormone health and cortisol. Restorative yoga, again, I talked about in the last episode, is a really good one too. It's just letting your body calm down and understand that it's in a safe place. as is self-massage. Super simple tools like raising your legs, so having your legs up the wall or just on pillows, even when you're just watching TV. This lowers the heart rate, calms the body down, and there are so many other tips and tools for cortisol. That's kind of all I can think of today. I haven't got notes. I don't really do notes. But we'll go over them again. Looking at your caffeine intake, maybe swapping out the matcha, although some people do find matcha is just as intense. And that might mean you need to go on dandelion tea or chai or something else. Really watching how you engage with all internet apps, green, blue screen, and light, and how you're exposing yourself. Make sure you sweat every day. Make sure you're going to the toilet every day. Working out, if you're especially doing a hard workout, making sure that happens in the first half of the day. And making sure you're eating enough carbohydrates. So I hope that this has been interesting for you. If it's opened up any cans of worms, I would have a look at my TikTok. I've got a huge series of how to heal excess cortisol and how to heal excess estrogen from my personal experience. And take care of yourself. Maybe look at cortisol if you've kind of started to self-identify as a really anxious person. Why not check out your cortisol levels, and maybe that will be something that you can work on that doesn't affect your identity and can calm you down in really simple lifestyle shifts that are for the most part free. All right, I hope that you got something out of this. Please share it with anyone who you know who's very stressed or very anxious or very overwhelmed. And yeah, follow, share, review. I love when you guys send me DMs. It's lovely to get messages from you saying how much you love the podcast. It's beautiful. I love it. But you could do the exact same thing and be really supportive of this podcast by leaving a 5-star review and writing what you would write in your DM in the review section, just at the bottom of the app. That is so supportive. And I'm just like you. I listen to tons of podcasts, and I've recently decided every single one I'm going to leave a 5-star review, the ones that I like, because, you know, we need to walk the talk a little bit. And if I'm asking you guys to do that for me, I need to be doing it as well. These are free pieces of content that people take hours out of their week to create for you, to engage with you, to give you value. And the only thing you need to do is to rate and review. So I would love that. Otherwise, share it with your community, and I'll see you next week.